Police watchdog says the former singer Ian Watkins could have been arrested for child sex abuse nearly 4 years earlier if the South Wales force had investigated complaints against him. Let's get more on this from our correspondent in Cardiff, Mark Hutchins. So, Mark, just remind us about this case.
Well, it was a truly shocking case. Here we had a global rock star adored by millions who privately was carrying out the most appalling abuse. In fact, in the end, it was a drugs raid that led to his arrest, but really drugs offences were the very least of it. I remember being at his first court appearance in Magistrates Court, and what we didn't know then, but we do know now, is that there was this timeline of nearly 4 years of opportunities missed by police to get him in the dock rather sooner and to end what the judge who finally sentenced him to 29 years in jail called behaviour that was plumbing the depths of depravity. There were clanging alarm bells surrounding Ian Watkins. This IPCC report today highlights the fact that for so long the police turned a deaf ear to them.
So tell us more about these complaints. How many were there and what were they saying?
Well, I've got a copy of the report here, and it pinpoints what it calls major shortcomings in terms of the police investigation, if you can call it that, certainly for over a near 4-year period into Ian Watkins. The main complainant was Joanne Mjadzelics. Now, she went to police repeatedly. First of all, in 2008, she took, on her mobile phone, she had a message from Ian Watkins saying he wanted to abuse children. Now, the report finds the police didn't look at that phone. They simply didn't believe Joanne Mjadzelics. They didn't think she was a credible witness. But in fact, there were 6 people who went to police with concerns about Ian Watkins, and this report finds that there were 8 reports, there were 3 intelligence logs, but actually 0 interviews with Ian Watkins. He wasn't arrested over that period, he wasn't questioned, he wasn't asked what he thought about the allegations. Let's hear now from the Commissioner who compiled today's report.
Bias, whether unconscious or conscious, has no place in modern policing. When someone comes forward with such a serious allegation, or indeed any allegation or report, it really shouldn't matter what they look like, who they are, what their lifestyle is, what they do. What's really important is what are they saying. And it's really important that's taken seriously and that some investigative work is done to see if there's any independent evidence to corroborate what they're saying.
So, Mark, what has been the police response to this?
Sorry, in a word. South Wales Police say that they didn't listen, they didn't properly investigate the complaints over that time, and that they are truly sorry. Now, there was one detective sergeant who faced a disciplinary hearing for gross misconduct. He was cleared at that hearing. Separately from this, there was also an IPCC report that came out last week into South Yorkshire Police, and that report criticised their inaction in terms of investigating Ian Watkins, because Joanne Mjadzelics went to them too, and that report found that there were 3 officers who would have faced disciplinary action at South Yorkshire. They would have, except that they've since retired, so they can't. And just going back to this report into South Wales Police, I'm just looking at the timeline of events, the summary of the complaints about him, and it says on various points, no action taken, no action taken, no action taken. Well, finally, the police did take action, but 4 years late.
Mark, thank you for updating us on that. Well, we can now speak to Michael Walkine QC. He defended Joanne Mjadzelics. Thank you ever so much for coming in. I know that Joanne didn't feel well enough to come and talk to us today, but I know you've spoken to her about this report. What's her reaction to it?
Degree of satisfaction. She's disappointed on a personal level. There's no apology to her. It's probably time for South Wales to respond with an apology which shows their integrity and to speak with grace about how they disregarded her. But it brings back these events, not as if she forgets them ever. Every day she tells me she cries for no obvious reason. Actually, the reasons are obvious. She was disregarded. She was someone who was defamed, written off as because of her less than conventional lifestyle. Maybe it wasn't a steady lifestyle.
She was a former sex worker?
Yes, she was a former sex worker, and so what? And she was wrongly accused during the trial of having been sectioned mental health section. That wasn't true. And so to face a jury with a person who comes from that sort of background was difficult. Their starting point might also be to disbelieve her. But police, who had the opportunity to look for corroboration of her claims, didn't do anything. They didn't have the wit to examine her phone. On her phone was a text with a wish list of abuse from Ian Watkins.
Do you know why? Because she was in a sort of on-off relationship with Ian Watkins,
Yes.
wasn't she? She'd got this text message from him, which, as you say, clearly outlined his desire to abuse children.
Yes.
She went to the police. Why didn't they look at that phone then?
She went to the police with a laptop. One police officer said that he or she wasn't qualified to examine a laptop. So whereas you and I can look at a laptop and be alarmed and at least interested when we see a picture of an underage child, he or she, I forget, I think it was one, wasn't interested enough because she wasn't qualified. So Joanne went back again and again and again, 4 times in all. So they didn't ask about her phone, but here was the laptop. And she said, I've got a picture that he sent me. They denied in due course that it was an underage child. It was a child of 4 or 5. During the trial, they claimed it was a child over the age of consent. They were wrong because Joanne didn't count for them.
In the report, it talks about, doesn't it, that they wanted to find the right type of complainant to come along. That's what the IPCC commissioner says, because of her unconventional lifestyle. Do you think this happens in other cases?
It must do. It must do. So in the same way that police now are told to really listen to young children who claim they've been abused by groups of men, what's the difference? So she comes from an unsteady background, not a conventional background, she's not posh. Actually, my interest in this case began when I saw, after Watkins' conviction, she was interviewed on television. She wasn't glorifying in the conviction. She was disturbed, and it was weighing on her. What could she have done more to stop people, to stop children being in danger? Well, she couldn't have done much more than going to that police station 4 times armed with a computer, emailing the Association of Chief Police Officers, and telling everyone. In fact, on one occasion, she said to people who had the care authorities had the duty to look after children, she said to them, if he does something again, it will be on your head, not mine. She was warning them. She was right. She was telling the truth from the start and all the way through.
It's interesting that the report says that he wasn't treated differently in Watkins because he was such an enormous star, because he was famous.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I don't accept that. I'm cautious about that. I don't think the report, I've had a quick look at it, I don't think the report mentions a memo that I used during the trial. From one police force to another, it said, he is a famous rock star, she is a former escort who's been sectioned. There's the comparison. It's called celebrity privilege. I know about that.
Thank you ever so much for coming in to speak to us today. Very grateful to you.
The paedophile rock star Ian Watkins could have been caught nearly 4 years earlier if South Wales Police had investigated the case properly. The Independent Police Complaints Commission says that officers in South Wales missed a series of chances to stop the Lost Prophets singer's abuse of children in the years before he was arrested. Well, obviously last week, South Yorkshire Police were also reprimanded for their failings in handling the case. Sky's Laura Bundock has more.
Ian Watkins was a highly dangerous and manipulative paedophile. The details of his child abuse were shocking. But what's also alarming is how the police failed to investigate complaints about him. Among them, one from an ex-girlfriend who said Watkins had texted her describing how he wanted to harm children. But a report by the police watchdog finds officers in South Wales didn't examine her phone. The force refused requests for an interview, but released this statement.
Today's report highlights a number of failings in which information about Ian Watkins was investigated between 2008 and 2012, which the force entirely accepts and regrets. South Wales Police failed to listen and properly investigate information about Watkins' offending behaviour. For this, we are truly sorry.
Between the end of 2008 and September 2012, South Wales Police received 8 reports and 3 intelligence logs from 6 different people that made a number of very serious allegations about Ian Watkins' paedophile activity. But Ian Watkins was free to offend throughout that time because South Wales Police missed one opportunity after another.
Last week, the South Yorkshire force was also criticised for missing opportunities in the investigation. The NSPCC says it's vital all recommendations are acted on.
This is a pretty damning report, and it should be a wake-up call for those involved, both within the police in South Wales, but also for all agencies that are involved in child protection, to make sure that they listen to complainants and take them seriously.
Ian Watkins was jailed for 29 years in 2013, but we now know he could have been brought to justice much earlier had the police properly acted. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, let's get the reaction of Peter Saunders, the founder of the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. He joins me from our central London studio. Many thanks indeed for joining us, Peter. Your reaction to the IPCC's findings?
Good afternoon. Well, yet again we're discussing a catastrophic failure on the part of, this time, the police to apprehend or to take heed of the people who came forward to report these incredibly serious crimes. They were not heeded, they were not acted upon, and you know, I'm often conflicted because at NAPAC we deal with the police on quite a regular basis now, and we know that they're working very hard to get this right, and that they're very, you know, historically, I shouldn't be using the term historically, but in the past, if you like, I think there has been a reluctance on the part of so many people, including our police, to actually accept what they are hearing sometimes. And if you read the accounts of what Watkins did and planned to do and told people he was going to do, some people may have actually doubted that was serious. But we're not talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're talking about relatively recently, 2008, 2009. And I am appalled that the police did not take these accusations, allegations seriously, as they should have done, because that is their job, is to investigate. It's not to pronounce judgment, it's to investigate, and they didn't even do that. And this report is pretty damning of South Wales Police, although again I would say they are not the only police force that have had serious and legitimate criticism in the past. But let's hope that it is the past and that things will move on and that they will learn these lessons of failure, because in that intervening time between when Watkins was first reported to the police and those reports were ignored, more victims were abused, and that will keep my charity, NAPAC, tragically, sadly, busy for many more years to come.
Yeah, and when the police do something as simple as failing to look at somebody's mobile phone after an allegation has been levelled, it does raise questions about how importantly, how seriously they take these allegations that have been levelled against individuals, and especially individuals who perhaps consider themselves above the law because they are famous, because they are celebrities.
Well, absolutely. There's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of it, I think, is around education and training. And you know, NAPAC provides the best training that there is around working with survivors of abuse and how to deal with this issue. And only a couple of weeks ago, I was called by a very senior police officer in one of our forces here in England, asking for some advice and about how to go about an investigation and how to deal with the survivors involved, because he admitted that in the past they have shone a light more on the victims, if you like, should we say victim blaming, victim investigation and victim doubting, rather than looking at the actual alleged perpetrators. And that was clearly the case in South Wales. So I know the police are trying to get it right now, and we need to get behind them. And you know, as I was walking here, we're in Millbank, as you know, as I was walking here today past the young policeman guarding Parliament and doing a great job and a brave job and interacting with the people, I realised just how generally our police do a fine piece of work, a job that most of us wouldn't want to do. But sometimes some of their colleagues get it spectacularly wrong. And when they get it so wrong, and when they get it sort of criminally wrong, then I think people need to be brought to account. And this report by the IPCC is very, very damning. And in a sense, it's a shame that some of the policemen at the heart of this have already retired, because I think they should have questions to answer about their behaviour and their lack of doing their job.
So should heads roll for this?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was what I was implying, was that there would clearly be, I would have thought, enough evidence, if you like, to question whether or not those policemen should have held their position. And, you know, you can't kind of, in a sense, retrospectively dismiss people, but, and you know, you do 30 years in the police and then generally you retire. And as I say, most of them do a good job. But in this case, I do wonder whether or not we need to look at the system that allows people who have not done the job for which they are paid in the past. I wonder whether we shouldn't allow them to get away with that.
Peter, really good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
And you.
A former rock star who's been jailed for multiple cases of child abuse could have been caught years earlier if the police had investigated him properly. Ian Watkins, the lead singer of the band Lost Prophets, was sentenced to 29 years in prison 4 years ago. But an investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission found that South Wales Police missed a series of opportunities to stop him. Our Wales correspondent Sian Lloyd reports.
A rock star and a hero to his fans across the world. But in private, Ian Watkins was a paedophile. His behaviour was described as having plumbed the depths of depravity. His sexual interest in children was reported by his former girlfriend. Watkins had sent indecent images to Joanne Mjadzelics' mobile phone, but when she took it to the police, her allegations were not followed up. The police watchdog, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, has found officers' bias against her meant Watkins was able to carry on abusing children. Joanne Mjadzelics spoke today of the toll it's all taken. She said, "The IPCC report finally vindicates me and accepts that from the outset I was telling the truth and trying to bring a serious criminal sexual predator to justice."
South Wales Police didn't begin investigating Ian Watkins until 4 years after they were tipped off that he was a danger to children. He was arrested during a drugs raid at his home here in Pontypridd. What they then found on his mobile phones and computers showed that those earlier warnings should have been acted on.
In all, 6 people made complaints about Watkins. None were followed up.
South Wales Police missed opportunity after opportunity to bring him in for questioning, to arrest him or to bring him to justice.
The force says it's truly sorry for its failings and has introduced wide-scale changes. The IPCC has also criticised South Yorkshire and Bedfordshire Police over inaction in investigating Watkins. The singer manipulated fans to get access to his victims. The extent of his abuse may never be known. Sian Lloyd, BBC News.
Now, detectives missed repeated opportunities to bring the paedophile Ian Watkins to justice, according to a damning report by the Independent Police Complaints Watchdog. The Lost Prophets frontman was eventually sentenced to 35 years in prison for a string of sex offences. South Wales Police said they were truly sorry and had introduced new measures to improve the way they protect vulnerable people. Our Home Affairs correspondent Darshana Soni reports, and a warning the subject matter is extremely distressing.
He was a rock singer whose band sold millions of records. But Ian Watkins was also a predatory paedophile who hid behind his celebrity. And yet he could have been stopped from abusing children 4 years earlier, according to a damning report into failings by South Wales Police.
This was one of the most disturbing and distressing investigations that I've overseen. Between the end of 2008 and September 2012, South Wales Police received 8 reports and 3 intelligence logs setting out allegations of Ian Watkins' paedophile activity. Throughout that time, Ian Watkins was free to continue offending.
The disgraced frontman is finally in prison, jailed for 35 years in 2013 after admitting numerous offences, including the attempted rape of a fan's baby. It was Watkins' former girlfriend, Joanne Mjadzelics, who first reported him to South Wales Police back in 2008. In her first TV interview following his conviction, she told this programme about her concerns.
It just got worse and worse, and then he would start telling me things about he wanted to get me pregnant so that he could rape our daughter. He wanted to kidnap children. He wanted to get me involved in it.
Over the next 4 years, she tried to report Watkins again and again, and not just to South Wales Police. She even saved text messages he had sent her that revealed his sexual interest in children. But officers dismissed her as a jilted lover, ignoring her because of what's been described as police bias.
She didn't quite fit the profile. She didn't have a convenient profile for the police. They thought it was a competition between a famous rock star and her former escort, a sex worker, and allegedly but wrongly accused of having been sectioned in the past. She didn't fit.
And yet Joanne Mjadzelics wasn't the only person to complain about Watkins. Others contacted South Wales Police, including a woman who believed he had assaulted an 11-month-old boy.
The IPCC has investigated 3 separate forces over this case: Bedfordshire, South Yorkshire and now South Wales. And yet, despite 3 critical reports, no officer from any of these forces has been sacked. And in the case of South Wales, although the watchdog recommended that 2 detectives should face misconduct hearings, the force decided to ignore this recommendation and no further action was taken against them. A 3rd officer was cleared after a hearing.
Does that mean that the IPCC is toothless?
The IPCC is an investigative body. When we think that an allegation comes in of such seriousness that we need to conduct an independent investigation, we set up a formal team, we set formal terms of reference, and the team goes where the evidence takes them.
So what's the point of the IPCC reports?
These are questions for South Wales Police, because the IPCC discharged its role.
We did try and put those questions to South Wales Police, but they refused our request for an interview. In a statement, the force said it had made significant changes to its practices as a result of the case.
Darshana Soni reporting. Well, I'm joined now from Salford by Nazir Afzal, the former Chief Prosecutor for the CPS in the northwest of England. What's the key lesson here?
I feel like a stuck record. The key lessons are many, but they ultimately start with believing, or at least giving the victim or complainant a chance to be heard. What we've learned from this report, again, like I've heard from so many others, is that police officers looked for everything that would undermine or potentially undermine the complainant's account, and did not in any way, initially anyway, look at the suspect. And that has been the failing pretty much on every investigation I've seen in relation to child sexual abuse going back a decade now. Poor sharing of information, not believing, not acting upon your belief, not acting with any speed or expeditiousness. Obviously, they've made some strides in the last 2 or 3 years, which led to the convictions, and for that they need to be commended. But ultimately, there were some serious failings, and they come down to the fact that individuals, for whatever reason, chose not to believe those that they should have believed.
So how can you stop this happening again?
I despair, actually, Krishnan, because time and time again people talk about learning lessons. I have not read a report that doesn't say that we've learned lessons. I think we should get it right first time. I think that you need to have specialist officers, as I think most forces now have. You have to have very good engagement with local communities and with other bodies that are able to support victims and complainants going forward. You need to investigate the suspect. I mean, the story before around the guru in India, the same principles apply. There is equality under the law. Everybody requires being properly investigated, and that clearly is not what happened here. And for 4 years, somebody was able to carry on being a predator on children, and that is just unjustifiable.
Do we need a major retraining program? I mean, obviously there's professional development, but I mean, does something bigger need to happen?
Absolutely. I've talked to so many victims groups now up and down the country, and trainers. They know so much more than those professionals who apparently do this job day in, day out. They should be embedded in investigators and in policing organisations, delivering training and learning on a daily basis, being available to counsel and provide advice and to support investigations, rather than coming in at the end and commenting on all the failures that may have happened. That, to my mind, is the answer. That is something that requires resources, but there are massive benefits in being able to do that.
Nazir Afzal, thank you very much.
Now, it's a story as depressing as it is familiar. Yet again, an abuser slips through the net because those who attempt to tell the authorities what was happening are simply ignored. A damning report has revealed how police wasted 4 years bringing the paedophile rock star Ian Watkins to justice. Time and again, officers were warned about his behaviour, by his ex-girlfriend, amongst others. Time and again, they decided the allegations were not worth investigating.
Ian Watkins, once a rock star who sold 3 million albums worldwide and had legions of fans, now known as a predatory paedophile who's serving 35 years in jail, but who was left free to abuse children for years because of a catalogue of police failures. The verdict of a damning report which said he could have been stopped much sooner.
Ian Watkins was free to continue offending because South Wales Police missed one opportunity after another to bring him in for questioning, to arrest him, to bring him to justice earlier. And at the heart of it was the way in which South Wales Police responded to the first person who came forward.
That person was Watkins' ex-girlfriend, Joanne Mjadzelics, who made numerous complaints about his behaviour to police. But she was ignored and dismissed because she was a sex worker, the report said, who the police felt lacked credibility. In a statement today, she said, "The report finally vindicates me and accepts that from the outset I was telling the truth and trying to bring a serious criminal sexual predator to justice." Speaking on her behalf, her lawyer said she should never have been disregarded.
The presentation of a laptop with indecent images that he had sent to her phone which they could access and find his ambition to abuse children in the future as well. There's the opportunity for them, so they can set aside what they think of her. It doesn't matter because she was offering them independent, concrete evidence.
In fact, today's report by the police watchdog found South Wales Police received 6 separate complaints and 3 phone tip-offs about Watkins and his abuse, generating 8 police reports over a 4-year period. All of them were ignored.
The fact that there were 4 more years between 2008 and 2012 with countless number of victims of child sexual abuse by Watkins, there have been so many missed opportunities that could have protected children and prevented harm coming to them.
The force refused our request for an interview, instead issuing a statement saying South Wales Police failed to listen and properly investigate information about Watkins's offending behaviour. For this, we are truly sorry and have implemented a range of measures to improve the way we protect vulnerable people. Lessons which have come far too late for many of Ian Watkins's victims